the question mark has always been the cornerbacks. I mean, even look at it at the spring ball game last season.
Yeah.
They were getting caught on by some bench warmers by the Oregon receivers, and it didn't really look good, but they made some plays in the season. But also, you talked about the Arizona State game. That was horrible for Oregon because I forgot who the Arizona quarterback dropped like 400 yards,
Yeah.
something like 6 touchdowns
They had
on our defense.
that was like 5'10". I love him because he was so impressive. But he was legitimately this true freshman that is exactly the kind of quarterback that an Oregon defense should feast on and should absolutely just harass during the game. But instead, it was making a joke out of Oregon's defensive scheme, out of their secondary, and it really was a nightmare for Oregon fans and quite the show for Arizona State fans.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. When you think about Jaden Daniels, you don't think that he's going to drop 400 passing yards in the game. But the cornerbacks, they looked helpless out there because now it wasn't just because of their performance. You have to give credit to those Arizona State receivers. They have some guys with burners on them, and they just couldn't keep up. And also, defensively, like I mentioned before, our defensive coordinator, he needed to make that adjustment because if you're watching your corners get burnt all game, you need to switch up the coverage to allow the safeties to help over the top. If you see them being burnt with streak routes or post or corner routes, you need to change to like cover 2 to cover 3 type of thing, to where the safeties are, or even cover 1 to have one up top to have the safeties be able to help those corners who are struggling against these fast receivers, or even change the technique that the cornerbacks are in, because if you're going in a press against the fast guy, that's not going to go well. And you saw it went throughout the whole game. You need to go 5 to 7 yards off of him to give you that extra cushion so that when he gets on you, then you can hold on to him and make sure that he doesn't do exactly what they did against Oregon.
What comes to mind is that you're talking about these games. I'd say Arizona State, Washington State, and Washington are 3 games that come to mind. And these were 3 really, really close games. The Arizona State game did have a moment, near the end where Oregon was coming back. And I think about defense. In all 3 of those games, the first half was just a boat race. I mean, it felt like the defense had no answers. I mean, really no answers to what they were doing. The adjustments weren't coming in. These quarterbacks were looking bad. They were not looking good. And then, the tables start to turn in the second half. Things start to turn around. Things start to slow down for the other team. And in those games where they lost, like Arizona State, it just wasn't in time. I mean, it really didn't come around fast enough. But in those games like Washington and Washington State, you know what comes to mind? Big plays, huge interceptions, or huge stops on 3rd down and 4th down, where the defensive backs just locked in and made the big plays they needed to. And I think that is what was so bizarre, was how in the same game you could watch them look so bad, and then you can sit there at the end of the game and say, oh, I mean, I think they won the game for Oregon with the way that they came through at the very last second when they needed to perform. They were awesome. They stopped them, and Oregon got the ball back, and that was, it felt like when the defense was being asked, like, we need to stop here, almost always they responded yes with a huge play, some sort of a turnover, or a big stop.
Yeah, and those type of plays, it always starts down low with the D linemen, D ends, because we had Kayvon and some other guys who disrupted quarterbacks basically every play. And if you have, as a quarterback, if you have a guy up in your face, or that your lineman can't block a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, because I'd be scared if I see that guy running at me full speed. I'd make some mistakes, and yes, give credit to those Oregon cornerbacks. Definitely give credit to them for making those type of plays. But also, Oregon brought in the pressure for the quarterback to make those type of throws, for those corners to make those plays. So all starts up, bottom to top.
Yeah, the big question is that last year the defensive backs, the secondary, were the weak point for that Oregon defense. That was a great defense, but the question mark was, whether they were going to stumble and make mistakes. And now you've got a lot of the same crew returning, a lot of the same names, plus the talent continuing to develop and the freshmen coming in. And you got to ask the question about whether they're going to take charge and be the strong part of this defense, whether they're going to really step up and just be consistently good, because they had the potential to be great and good all the time, but the consistency was not there at all. And I'm curious from Andy Avalos' perspective as the defensive coordinator, as well as just that group of dudes, whether you'll see the consistency.
Yeah, for me, if they're not consistent this year, because Andy Avalos, he also talked about it, and so has Chris Ball. They've both mentioned it, how weak the secondary has been past years, and how they're like, well, we've told these guys just stick with it, stick with these guys, learn from the guys who've been through the bad years, and we've seen a production value with these cornerbacks and these safeties. But for me, if they don't have a better season, especially in the cornerbacks area, because safeties, I'm not worried about the safeties at all. Javon Holland, Brady Breeze, they're going to have outstanding seasons. But guys like Jerome McKinley, Thomas Graham Jr., if they don't have a better season than what they had last season, I think we need to be looking for a new DC. I've already said it. I mean, I'm not too big on that guy. A new DC with Joe Moorhead and Mario Cristobal, like I said, that'd be amazing for Oregon.